The following is a JourneyWise Network production.
I don't know if you are listening to this by audio, you can't see it, but if you're watching the video of it, you know that I love to eat. Food is a very important part of my life, and I love great food with great seasons. Well, one of my dearest friends is Robert St. John, who is a restaurateur and an author and just an amazing chef. And not only has he learned how to navigate through the world of food, but he's also learned how to give back in the world of food in very specific and special ways. Here's our conversation today on You Matter with author, restaurant owner, and chef Robert St. John. Take a listen. Hey friends, we want to welcome you to our latest episode of the You Matter podcast. And today is a guy that I've respected for many years and have watched his journey, his career, and so thankful for so many memories and stories that I have of him. And so it's great to have with us chef and restaurateur and author and travel god, Robert St. John. Robert, it's great to have you with us, buddy.
Hey, man. How's it going, Shane? Good to talk to you.
It's going good. Thank you. And for people who maybe don't know all that you do and who you are, would you just give us sort of a brief synopsis of the Robert St. John story, the journey?
Yeah, I'll give you the Reader's Digest version of that. I was born in Hattiesburg, Mississippi in 1961. My dad died when I was 6. My mom was a public school art teacher. She raised my brother and me up on an art teacher's salary, which meant I had to work. So I started working early. I was in radio as a disc jockey for a long time, and I got into the restaurant business when I was 19, and have been in that ever since. It was one of those things. I fell in love with it instantly, and opened my first restaurant in 1987. And since then, I've written, I guess, 12 books and done a TV show and produced some documentaries and host tours in Europe. I'm speaking to you now from the Tuscan countryside, which it's a white background, I know, but the internet's spotty over here, so I'm inside against this white wall. But that's kind of it. I've been married for 30 years. We have 2 kids, 25 and 21, a daughter and a son, and that's pretty much it. I've got, I don't know, like 7 restaurants, I think, and a bar.
Wow, you have been busy. I think when you and I first met, and of course I had known of Crescent City, the restaurant that's still my favorite restaurant. We were in Hattiesburg just last week, and we went and ate over there, so we love it. But I remember the first time I met you, something happened, and I don't know if you remember this story, but something got sent back to the kitchen, and it was from the guy sitting behind me, but you thought it was me, and you came out and knelt down, and you had your white coat on, and you were kind of walking me through, and you were this close to giving me free lunch. And the guy behind me went, "No, it's me." And you went, "Oh, I'm so sorry." And you moved on. And I thought, well, that's a nice guy. And I almost got free lunch. But then we met again when I did a workshop at Main Street United Methodist Church in Hattiesburg.
Yeah.
And we began talking. And here was this guy that's, very well known in the Hattiesburg area. But you at the time were really, I think, thinking through a lot of, and you always have come to find out, thinking through a lot of aspects about your faith, and church has always meant a great deal to you, and your faith has meant a great deal to you. You have had one of those journeys that I think people think, oh my gosh, everything has been perfect. So it's always gone just really well. And that's not the case. You've had your moments of ups and downs like anybody. Getting in the restaurant business was an adventure, to say the least, wasn't it?
Yeah. But it's one of those things I think everybody is meant. I think you do. You're so good at what you do. I think you're doing exactly what you were meant to do. And I think restaurant business was like that for me. Once I got into it, I connected like that. I feel like it was the first shift of the first day it was like, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to open up a restaurant. And so, yeah, I think it's what I was wired to do. I love it. That's where my passion lies. And, you and I both believe success follows passion.
Absolutely. What is it about that particular business that you think draws you to it so much? What is it about the interactions or the work?
I am severely, our good friend Ronnie Kent would diagnose me as severely ADHD. They didn't have a name for it when I was a kid, but I would have been the poster child for that stuff. And so, I'm like off thinking about this and that. I got about 20 things going on at once. And the restaurant business kind of caters this. And that's probably has something to do with why I connected right off the bat, the first shift. There was a lot going on, and it was peaks and valleys, and I just loved it. It had to do with food, which I love food, always had. And it connected. I loved it so much. I managed a delicatessen during the day, and then I got a job waiting tables at night, and I just couldn't get enough of it.
So what led you to start your own restaurant, and what was that experience like? Working in the business to being the business.
So I flunked out of college, which is why I got in the restaurant business. There were two ladies opening up a delicatessen who had no idea about the restaurant business, which is evident because they hired me as the manager of the restaurant. And it was that's when I fell in love with it. And I started working at night, and I was like, this is what I want to do. I want to open a restaurant one day. I mean, and that was my goal from that point on. The problem was that I was pretty heavily into alcoholism and drug addiction at that time in my life. And it took a couple of years. I got clean and sober in May 25th of 1983. I was 21 years old, been clean and sober since then. And that's when I really was able to put my life on the fast track and went back to school and got a degree in hospitality management and opened that first restaurant, which was the Purple Parrot, a fine dining restaurant, December of 1987, and been opening up restaurants ever since then. I love it.
Well, and so you said you have 7 restaurants now. You have quite an assortment, and it does sort of speak to the attention deficit because you have different types of restaurants. Can you kind of give us a rundown of all the restaurants?
Yeah. So Purple Parrot was open 33 years. It was a COVID casualty. We've reconcepted that into a Tex-Mex restaurant. But Crescent City Grill that you spoke of has been open 30 some odd years. It's a New Orleans themed restaurant. We have Tabella, which is an Italian themed restaurant. Ed's Burger Joint, obvious. We have a place called the Midtowner, which is breakfast and lunch. Mahogany Bar, which is a neighborhood watering hole. And then we have a new restaurant in Jackson called Enzo, which is an Italian restaurant actually named after the guy who owns this villa I'm in right now over in Tuscany. His name is Enzo Corti.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Well, is there any particular style that you like? What is your taste in terms of your own personal food taste?
I wrote about this week, and early on, man, it was just fine dining. That's all I wanted to do. And the older I've gotten, my personality is a lot more casual than that. And so I've really kind of morphed into more of the casual realm. It's all about, for me these days, it's all about accessibility and community. And, everybody that wants to eat out, I want to be able to feed them in one of my places. The Midtowner is the perfect example of that. It's the breakfast and lunch place. It's located right across from University of Southern Mississippi. And it was my goal that I wanted to make the most Hattiesburg restaurant ever in Hattiesburg. I wanted to be a community cafe where everyone could eat, because that's all we used to have. We used to have really fine dining French restaurants. To go back to the 1940s, you'd have a really fine dining French restaurant, and then the rest of it were just cafes and diners and places like that where everybody met. And then I wanted to do, nobody's doing that anymore. And I wanted to do that to where young, old, black, white, rich, poor, the girl with Greek letters on her sweatshirt and the guy with his name on his work shirt. I wanted everybody in there. And one of the proudest moments I've had in the restaurant business was a couple of weeks in. I was working the window and I turned around, looked in the dining room, and that's who was there. It was the entire community, young, old, black, white, rich, poor. Everybody was in there. And that's kind of what I'm into these days.
Well, tell me, as you're starting a restaurant like the Midtowner, which probably now has become my new favorite just because I love breakfast so much.
Me too.
I've been there many times. When you go to start a restaurant, what is the kind of the process that you work through in your brain in terms of what you're going to serve and what it's going to look like? How do you work through that now?
Well, for a place like the Midtowner, we do breakfast and we do kind of meat and 3 lunch, heritage cuisine, what our grandmothers made after church, on Sunday. And so that pretty much dictates what the menu is going to be there. I mean, you got to have pancakes and waffles and, fried eggs and biscuits and all the stuff. And lunch, it's fried chicken and meatloaf and chicken pot pie and those kind of things. And so that dictates what we do. Now, the management style, I opened that first restaurant, whatever it was, been 35 years ago, I guess, 36 maybe. We hired 4 managers, and I haven't hired a manager since. And we just promote from within. And so sometimes people go and they have ownership. Jared Patterson started with me as a waiter when he was in college 15 years ago. He owns 50% of Enzo now.
Wow, that's great.
Stacy are my partners at Tabella. All the managers. We have a very it wasn't planned this way, but majority of our management team are hardworking women, and I was raised by a hardworking woman, single mom, and I have ultimate respect. I always believe women are a lot tougher than we are.
Oh, that is absolutely true. I can testify to that myself.
You and I both can.
Very strong women. I have a mom very much like your mom. I just talked to yesterday by Zoom, and she was still giving me a list of things that I needed to take care of this week. And so that's just the kind of way it rolls. I understand
you've been the lone guy for a long time up in that family.
Just about every direction I walk. Yes.
Hey friends, there is a wonderful podcast that's part of our JourneyWise podcast network that I have listened to every episode and I love it. And it's called Choosing Cheer. And the host is Nicolette Bell, who is our Chief Operating Officer and one of our teachers. Nicolette, tell us about Choosing Cheer.
Yeah, so I grew up as a cheerleader. And so I had learned this verse in John as a little girl where Jesus says, in this world, you will have trouble, it's a promise, but be of good cheer, I have overcome the world. And I learned that verse as a young girl on how to have a positive attitude.
Sure.
And so cheerleading was more to me than a sport growing up. It was a mindset that I had. And as I grew older and began to dig in the scriptures, I began to realize the connection that had to Jesus. And so we do a lot of talking about the joy of Jesus, finding the joy of Jesus in life's most difficult moments and then in life's everyday moments as well.
Well, anyone who knows you knows that you live this philosophy, this motto so well. And it does. It brings me a lot of joy to listen. I don't listen to a lot of podcasts, I'll admit that. But the ones I do, I've become very faithful. And this is one of my favorites. Take a listen. Choosing Cheer with host Nicolette Bell.
I know community matters to you, Robert. I know that it's important to you. And several years ago, you actually started an organization that's gotten a lot of review and a lot of support lately. Tell us a little bit about how you are reaching out to those who maybe are less fortunate.
Yeah, 2009, I got a telephone call from Edward Street Fellowship Center, a place well, run by a collection of Methodist churches around the Hattiesburg area. At the time, they were feeding about 800 families a month, and they had completely run out of food, no food. And they called and said, is there anything you can do to help us? They were panicking. 2 days, they had all their clients coming in to feed. And I said, sure. And I figured the best way to help would be to just call my food service distributor, put together an order, and have it drop shipped to the agency. And I did. And they were able to feed their clients. And I started thinking at that time, I bet if there were an easier way to supply these kind of places, maybe they wouldn't run out of food. But to be honest with you, I was skeptical there was even a hunger problem in Mississippi. I mean, I was thinking, I hate to kind of tell myself, but it was like, this is America. I mean, we don't have hunger. I get some third world Central American country may have hunger issues, but not here. And so I went on kind of a fact-finding mission across the state, and it didn't take long before I probably got to Jackson, and I learned there's a huge problem.
Yes.
And my eyes were opened. And Mississippi has 2.9 million, fairly small state, 2.9 million people. Out of that 2.9, 20%, like 670,000 Mississippians are food insecure.
Yes.
Over 120,000 seniors, over 250,000 kids who eat a school breakfast, a school lunch, and then don't eat again until the next day. And so I was like, I got to do something about this. And so I formed an organization. It's called Extra Table, based on the premise of what if every table and every business and every home had an extra table where they could feed those in need. And so we started, and that was 2009. And I will tell you, in 2020, we shipped 2.9 million tons of food to over 61 agencies across Mississippi. It started with that one. And to be honest with you, about 5 years ago, our board, of whom you know several of, our goal was to be in every county in Mississippi. Mississippi has 82 counties. There's a lot of counties. And I was like, we're going to do that. But be honest with you, I'm telling myself again, on the inside, I was going like, there's no way we're going to, and we're in like, I don't know, 70 some odd now. So it's pretty close. I founded Extra Table on two principles. Number one, 100% of the money we raise for food goes to purchase food. I wasn't going to be a part of anything where all this, extra administrative costs go to the top and all that. 100% of the money we raise for food goes to food. So I started a separate 501c3 that just raises money for the minimal admin costs. I mean, during that 2020 year, it was one employee that did all of that feeding. It's not me, I've never taken a dime, but the other thing is we found a founding principle is that it's always going to be healthy food. Because Mississippi's number one in food insecurity. We're also number one in obesity, which I had a problem with that. I was like, well, somebody's eating something somewhere, and then I learned the more I dug in is that those people are living out of people that are food insecure are basically living out of convenience stores.
Absolutely.
And cheapest sugar drinks and snack foods and living off of that.
Well, interestingly enough, over the last 10 years here in Memphis, we had a situation where literally in the center of the Memphis metro area was one of the most significant food deserts that you could, and a lot of it had to do with crime and insecurity and some other things going on, but work to try to get a grocery store to come in, and then working to have the supporting agencies around it. And it's not easy. I think people like you and me, I felt the same way when I first got into the issue, that I think people think that in the United States, because we, spend $50 billion on diet products in the United States every year, that obviously there can't be a problem in the United States. But I think exactly what you just pointed out, for someone who's looking to try to know more about this, what would you suggest to them to be able to learn more about food insecurity and food deserts?
First of all, I would go to extratable.org and learn. It's a great system. We just use business principles for a nonprofit, and it's a very easy process. We call on food pantries like Edward Street, like that first one. We approach them. It's kind of funny at first because they're skeptical. We're going, hey, we're Extra Table. We want to send you food, and they're like, well, how much is it going to cost us? It's not going to cost you anything. We're going to raise money. We're going to use that money to buy food below wholesale. We're going to deliver it to you free. And then, well, do you want our mailing list? No, we don't want our mailing. We just want to send you food. We're going to raise money, send you food. And they're still skeptical until we get them the first shipment. And then it's like, oh, this is great. And they love us. So, and then we keep going. We do it once a month, because the problem with feeding agencies, there are two big problems that people don't understand. Most of them are operated off canned food drives, which are the most ineffective way to supply a food pantry. I mean, unfortunately, it's an opportunity for people to just clean out their pantry. And that's one thing I learned when I was on that fact finding mission is I'd see stuff like blueberry pie filling and stuff. And some kid that's getting out of school is not going to go have breakfast till the next day, doesn't need blueberry pie filling.
Yeah. No.
You know, and the other thing is you know, they're run off senior citizen labor a lot of times and volunteer labor.
Yes.
And so, you know, we deliver directly to the agency. Nobody has to pack beans and rice and all that. So we do it all for them.
In your studies in the last year, do you know how many families are being fed through Extra Table?
I wish I had that statistic. It would be pretty staggering.
Yeah.
How effective we are. And I'm not taking credit for that because it's all the people who donate and all the people who volunteer and all of that. But it's hundreds of thousands.
Sure. Well, I know you are the type of person, as I've gotten to know you over the years, that when you hear a need or see a need, you respond, and you're trying to, you try to respond in very practical ways. When did your faith become an important part of who you are?
You know, I grew up in, like we said earlier, Main Street United Methodist Church, and we were there when the doors were open. I mean, I was Sunday morning, Sunday night, Wednesday. We skated in the fellowship hall on Saturday. You know, I was there, and so that was the foundation for my faith. And then my grandmother on my dad's side was the kind of the living example for me. That I know I'm probably supposed to be a what would Jesus do kind of guy, but more times than not, I'm what would my grandmother do. She was that.
I think
she was
Jesus
a saintly
okay
woman.
with that too.
She was a saintly woman, and she's the person I still try to emulate in so many ways. And so, you know, that was my faith early on, and then you know, through recovery, I really started gaining a personal relationship with God more so than I did. Nothing against the church at all.
Sure.
But, you know, it's through recovery and seeing what God did in my life. I'm at 21, I had resigned myself that I wasn't going to live to be 30, and I was okay with that. But the truth is, the way I was going, I probably wouldn't have made 25.
Sure.
And the fact that I was able to make it through, you know, serious alcoholism and drug addiction with an angel on my shoulder is no other explanation. So that's really, you know, when my whole faith journey started.
Well, and you've been, you know, a true practitioner of that. I know it has meant so much to you. You write a lot about it. You talk about it, you know, about your journey. Have there been people that have come into your life or ways that you've seen God has used you through your journey to maybe impact the journey of someone else?
You know, a lot through recovery. And I hate to keep going back to that, but it's one of the, you know, foundations of me today. And for a lot, I was always open about it. You know, I go to a 12-step program, and you're not supposed to talk about that specifically, but you know, it's all anonymous, this and that. But I've never been. I've protected other people's anonymity. I've never been anonymous on my own because I'm open about it. But something happened. I was on the board of this collegiate campus. I'm drawing a blank on collegiate. It's a recovery program on college campuses. And I was on board at Southern Miss, and I was talking about me being in recovery and all that. And a man came up to me afterwards. You know this guy, and whose son had died from an overdose. And he said, "I wish my son would have known you were in recovery. He may still be alive." And it was kind of a heavy thing to drop on somebody. You know, I don't feel responsible for that, but it got me thinking, you know what, I probably need to be more open and about that. One time I was a drug addict and alcoholic, and, you know, I was saved from that life by, you know, recovery program and a spiritual relationship with God. And, And so I've been more vocal about it ever since then. I'm not sure if I answered your question, but
No, you did, because I mean, I think there's courage in the journey, and then for those of us who've been called to sort of tell everything about our story, that's not always easy. That's a different part of the journey. And I've had people who've said, my gosh, my children call it the Stanford gene of oversharing. And I understand that, because my story, since I went to be ordained, was laid out in front of everybody for everyone to understand and see, and even some of the bad parts, certainly. But there is.
I tell your story a lot when I speak about faith to different groups. I use you as really the primary example all the time on how you have dealt with all that you've dealt with over the years. So,
Well, you're very kind, and thank you. And I think recently, since Ronnie and I've been, Ronnie Kent, who's working with us, we've been working on this new thing called anxiety algorithm. And I've talked about the panic attacks that started after heart surgery that I told no one about until a year and a half ago. And every time I would get up to preach, I would have these panic attacks, and they would be just terrible, and really it causes you to make decisions in your journey, your life, your relationship with other people, because you're just trying to survive. And out here, everybody thinks they know. And of course, when somebody's sharing their story, they think they know who you are. At the same time, that you build this sense of responsibility and accountability, because you don't want to let anybody down. That's where all this was going.
Right.
What makes you get up in the morning and just want to do the best you can for wherever God plants you?
Well, number one, I love what I do. I truly, it really occurred to me one time. I was 7 or 8 years ago. I was with my son, Harrison, and we were driving down the road. And he said, "Dad, what do you think I ought to do for a living when I grow up?" And I thought for a second. I said, "Son, I don't know. You're going to figure that out. Whatever it is, don't follow the money. Don't chase money. Find out what you." And then I said this, and as the words were coming out of my mouth, it hit me for the first time. I said, "Son, ever since I've owned that business, I don't know how many years it had been at that time, 20 or 30. I said, I have never once, not once, gotten up in the morning and gone, oh, got to go to work." I'd never thought about that, but I never have. It's not because it's always been easy, because it's a restaurant business is brutal, but it's just that I love doing what I do. I love restaurants and the restaurant business. It's, I don't hunt, I don't fish, I don't play golf. Restaurants are my hobby. And so I'm blessed that, I do my hobby for a living. So I told him, whatever it is, that's what you need to find that for you. And so, I guess that's the best answer with work. But I try to separate, as much as I'm passionate and love the restaurant business, I try to separate work and family. And it wasn't until my daughter was born, she was my first 25 years ago, that I was probably a pretty materialistic, worldly items and thinking kind of guy. And it was around the time she was born, which is around the time you and I got to know each other, that I started. It's not the material things and the monetary things that started to matter. It's the spiritual things and the relational things. Sure. And that's not a natural thing I wasn't born that, we had no money growing up. And so, I went through a period in my life when I first started making money. I was so materialistic and it was all about money and things and stuff. And so I'm not naturally this way, but, I think that's a spiritual thing too. It's all this, at the end of the day, it's not all the stuff and the things and the cars, and so it's lives impacted and experiences shared. And it's the relational things and the spiritual things that really matter. And when I came to realize that through kids, and I stopped working nights in the restaurant business. You got to work nights.
Sure.
our kids were born, I stopped working nights and tried to prioritize. So I got a lot of job titles, but the most important job title I've ever had is dad. And,
Sure. I agree with you.
that's it.
I agree with you. I totally. A couple more questions in
Sure.
the time we have left. We do have someone that we both work with that's been very important to our life, and that's Anthony Thaxton.
Yeah.
Anthony is who is our media director for our Servant School channel that we're developing and be launching. But you guys had an amazing last year. In fact, I remember where I was in Georgetown when I was watching the Emmy Awards on my phone when y'all won an Emmy for the Walter Anderson documentary. What got you and Anthony and you're making another one about Eudora Welty.
Yeah.
So what got you into the documentary business?
Anthony and I have worked together for 20 years. I think I'm the one that introduced you to Anthony. I was on his show at First Baptist. I said, you got to meet this preacher.
You are the one.
This
Yes, you
guy's
are.
awesome. And so, we've worked together ever since those days. And Anthony is truly probably the most talented guy I know. I mean,
agree.
He's a musician, he's a director, he's an editor, he's a singer, he's an artist. He's funny, he's clever, he's witty. I mean, he's got it all. He's sharp, and he's a devout guy as well. And we worked on this television show called Palate to Palate, did 5 seasons on PBS. Filmed another season in Spain, and while we were doing one of these Mississippi tours and filming that, we got the idea to do a documentary on Walter Anderson.
Mm-hmm.
And it's the documentary and the book are 95% Anthony. I share a name on there and a little advice and stuff here. I mean, it's really all Anthony who has done that. And now, like you said, we're doing the Eudora Welty thing. We've started this center for Southern Storytelling Institute at Mississippi College for Southern Storytelling.
Very much.
It's going to be excellent. We're going to run, a lot of these kind of documentaries through there. It was my goal from the start as the producer of that Walter Anderson documentary that I wanted people from Portland, Oregon to Portland, Maine to know who Walter Anderson was.
Sure.
And we succeeded way beyond what I thought we'd do. We had over 1,000 airings all across the country, all top 100 markets, all prime time. I mean, it was 360 public broadcasting stations, I think. So, that just fueled the fire for us to want to do more telling stories about these people in their lives that the rest of the country needs to know.
Well, and Eudora Welty, who's one of my favorite authors, is next. Robert, I have one more question. I want to say this, though. You've had profound effect on my life in many different ways, but in some smaller ways that maybe you didn't know. I walked into your office one time and there was a picture of Ernest Hemingway, the white bearded Ernest Hemingway on the wall. You got me to reading Hemingway again. I had never really done a lot of listening to the blues. You got me into listening to the blues. And now, of course, I've spent the last 12 years in Memphis. And, so there's not a day that goes by that there's not some impact that you have had somewhere along my journey. And I want to thank you for that.
Likewise. And you've had the same impact on me.
Well, you're kind. Thank you. Last question I ask it of all the guests. The name of the program is You Matter. Where do you think God has you mattering most right now?
I'll tell you the things. Being a father, again, is the most important job, and that's where my number one focus is. Trying to be a good husband, and then trying to be a good employer. I employ 400 people, and who they feed their families based on decisions I make, and so it's a lot of responsibility. So. I'm not any longer trying to take over the world in the restaurant business. There's a little area that I want to have influence in and influence on, and I'm blessed to have creative control in every, whether it's books or TV or restaurants and all that. And so I just, I'm overly blessed. Walking around every day when I wake up, it's just more than I deserve. And I don't know if I answered your question again, but
I think you answered it great. Robert, thank you so much for being with us today.
good to see you, buddy.
All right, man.